Hi, everyone. Welcome. My name is Serena Longo, and on behalf of Harvard Bookstore, I'm so pleased to introduce this virtual event with Shugri Said Salh presenting her new book, The Last Nomad, joined in conversation by Abdi Nor Iftin. Thank you for joining us virtually this evening. We're delighted to have you. Harvard Bookstore's virtual event series continues this summer, bringing authors and their work to our community and our digital community. Find our event schedule at harvard.com/events, where you can also sign up for our email newsletter and shop our shelves from home. This evening's discussion will conclude with some time for your questions. If you have a question for our speakers at any time during the talk tonight, click on the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen, and we'll get through as many as time allows. This event also has auto-generated closed captioning available. Depending on the version of Zoom you're using, you may need to enable captions yourself by clicking on the closed caption button on your screen. In the chat, I'll be posting links to purchase The Last Nomad on harvard.com, as well as a link to donate in support of this series and our store. Your purchases and financial contributions make events like tonight's possible, and as always, help ensure the future of a landmark independent bookstore. Thank you all for tuning in and showing up in support of authors, publishers, and indie book selling. We sincerely appreciate your support now and always. And finally, as you have no doubt experienced in virtual gatherings, technical issues may arise. If they do, we'll do our best to resolve them as quickly as possible. Thanks for your patience and understanding. And so now I'm so pleased to introduce tonight's speakers. Shugri Said Salh was born in the desert of Somalia in 1974 and spent her early years living as a nomad. In 1992, she emigrated to North America after civil war broke out in her home country. Although this is her first book, Shugri has been storytelling since she could talk. From her grandmother and the nomadic community in which she was raised, she heard stories and learned of their power to entertain, teach, and transform. Joining Shugri on our digital stage this evening is writer and broadcaster Abdi Nor Iftin, author of the memoir Call Me American. They'll be discussing Shugri's new book, The Last Nomad, Coming of Age in the Somali Desert. Kirkus Reviews calls it a thoughtful look at an often misunderstood culture and religion, and Publishers Weekly writes, Salh's prose radiates with deep empathy and sensitivity, a reflection of the gift of storytelling she inherited from her poet grandmother. This stuns with its raw beauty. We're so pleased to be hosting this event tonight. The digital podium is yours, Shugri and Abdi.
Well, hello. Thank you so much, Serena, for the beautiful introduction. And I am truly, truly excited for this event tonight. Virtually stunning side by side with an amazing author, Shukri Salah. I would like to say a few words before we dive into it, if you don't mind, Shukri. As I
Please
was
do.
reading, as I was reading your memoir, what was going through my mind was, all the emotions that you can imagine. At one point, it has a strong feeling of turning that amazing oral tradition that you and I and our ancestors had
Yeah.
into a printed word, right? And
Hmm.
this means that now we can save those words for the next future generation, and the kids who have been or had been outside of Somalia for the last 30 years or so.
Hmm.
As you probably know, today's generation, 70% of them were not born in Somalia. They were
Wow.
either in refugee camps outside of the country or in other places. And you and I are witnesses of those
Hmm.
situations in the United
Mm.
States, where we come across kids uh, who are from Somali parents but don't really have much perception of this beautiful nomadic culture of Somalia. And
Hmm.
again, you have humanized the stories, the
Hmm.
these stories that pretty much come from Somalia. If you look at the paper, the radios, the television, are
Hmm.
about war, violence, terrorism, piracy, all kinds of negativity that you could come up with. But this book has really brought forward the untold stories which everybody should read. So thank you very much, and I've really enjoyed
Thank,
it, and I hope everybody else will be able to.
thank
So
you.
yeah, will you, Shukri, will you go ahead and introduce the beautiful Somali proverb, the when an elder dies, a library is burned. Uh,
Mhm.
I definitely know what that means, but I would love the audience to know. And I would also like you to talk a little bit about the family oral history or tradition that we have in Somalia and why that's so important, particularly in today's generation. And if you want to share some other beautiful uh, quotes or sayings or proverbs from
Yeah,
books,
yeah.
go ahead.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much, Abdi. I am at the listening to your own memoir, Call Me American, and I'm enjoying. I have it in Kindle and in audio, and I am loving it. So thank you so much, Abdi, for what I really also want to say is Harvard Book Store. I really am so honored and humbled that you guys really chose me tonight to be one of the presenters. Thank you so much, and I'm hoping you can all order books from them. It's a hard time in bookstores. It's pandemics and all this crazy thing, so it's not easy to bring audience and get authors are not going in to sign books. So it's a loss of revenue. So it would be nice if you can all really do something kind and order the books from there, or if you're not around there, whatever books are ordered. Okay, Abdi, thank you so much again. I am elated to be in this conversation with you because we both are Somali, and you wrote your memoir so beautifully, and then I did mine, and you're male and I'm female, and I think between the two of us, everyone is getting what it's like to be Somali. We touched listening to your memoir. I can say now we cover everywhere, So thank you. So I always used to hear when an elder dies, a library is burned. I can't say it with certainty that it's a Somali, but I know it's an African proverb. And, it comes from the idea that, for me, it means to me. For me, it means that I had this unusual life. And I don't know if many of you read the book, but perhaps maybe this is a time to give you a little background, just a snip of it. Is I am a daughter of a nomadic mother and a well-educated father. And when, my mother left that world when she was 15, when she married my father, who was at the time 40. Everyone is guessing their age. Really, none of us know our real age. Maybe the newer generation of Somalis do. It looks like Abda and I both guessing, if I'm not mistaken. So when my mother married my father in the city, she became adamant that she decided she's going to give one of her daughter to as a gift of labor to her mother, my grandmother, my ayeyo, Halima Hirsipilo. And so that's started the argument or the fight over my destiny. And my mother was fierce about it, and she really felt like she has to give one of her daughter. Boys as were not for domestic chores or helpers, they were not boys. It was always girls that were sacrificed for that. So here I was, this big ear kid going to the first grade in Somalia, and I was pulled out of it when my mother won that argument, and I was dropped in the desert to be a helper to my grandmother. What that really meant was I wasn't going to get an education like the rest of my sibling. And mind you, my father, who was an educator, really wanted his daughters to be educated. You know what I mean? And so he even held a different view than the Somalis of that time. He felt that if you educate a daughter, you educate a whole village. If you educate a son, you educate only that son. So you can imagine the fight that took place for my father to lose this war. And what I find myself is, it's me weaving this tale for you. And really, now that you have some idea where this book's coming from, I really feel I am that vessel that lived in the desert and now here in California as a nurse, so, living with children who don't even know the world I speak of, right? My children do not know when I said, oh yeah, we used to live in a hut and we used to herd our animals around and we were in search of grazing land, of water hole. They're like, what? My son is talking about his YouTube and his rap is what's the top of his game. And so I really wanted to bridge that gap and make them understand where I come from. And like Abdi was saying earlier to me, he was really thankful that this book was written because he too, I mean, I'm older than Abdi, so for him, he'd never seen a nomad. I mean, I'm assuming that's right, reading from your book. You just know the knowledge of your parents. So here I am giving him this raw material from the nomadic world, and that's something that's needed, not only for Abdi's youngsters, like Abdi's age, youngsters like teenagers like my son's age. It's literally an excavated this world for them, and they can just know what it's like to live as a nomad, as the book just takes through you, like from a nomad to city life everywhere, to Somali civil war, what it's like to be a refugee, and threaded woven in there is humor, because I claim that I'm kind of funny sometimes. So yeah, that is to me. I did not want to die with this. Unlike the Somali says, "Wari maiside warhakaharo," which means you are not going to, loosely translated, you're not going to live long, and so you may as well leave your words behind. And what a beautiful time to do in this time of great misunderstanding. Especially toward refugees, immigrants, and people that are different from us. For I believe stories have a ways of reminding us our shared humanity and creating a greater understanding and a deeper connection. Yeah.
I am really curious to know the answer to this question.
Mm-hmm.
You're right. I wasn't lucky enough to be born in the nomadic culture. My mother was, and she has never expected that that would ever end, but it did end for her in
Mm-hmm.
1977 when the
Mm-hmm.
drought hit and their animals died.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
So
That makes sense.
here's a question that I always ask my mother, and she tells me the same thing over and over and over.
Mm-hmm.
I ask her, um, Mom, what do you miss about the nomadic culture of Somalia that she grew up with as a little
Mm-hmm.
girl, as a teenager, and even up until she got married when she was um, in her 20s.
Yeah.
One thing that she says is freedom. And I'm really curious. She says freedom, and she's able to explain that. She says, for example, a city life in Somalia is more like living in prison if you're a woman, right?
Wow.
You are exposed
Mm-hmm.
to the tough culture that does exist in a city, particularly
Mm-hmm.
for a woman, right? It
Mm-hmm.
includes
Oh yeah. Oh
female
yeah.
genital mutilation, which pretty much doesn't exist in massive areas of the nomadic culture
Mm-hmm.
because they don't even have time for that. They don't even have scissors and anything and blades, right?
Mm-hmm.
She says freedom because she misses a lot of that freedom she had as a little girl, waking
Mm-hmm.
up in the morning and
Mm-hmm.
herding
Mm-hmm.
hundreds and hundreds of goats from
Mm-hmm.
one place to the other, and
Mm-hmm.
also living in this open land where
Past open land, yeah.
she walks hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of miles, and
Mm-hmm.
she would run into another nomadic community who are also
Mm-hmm.
moving because they never
Mm-hmm.
settled in the same place.
Yeah.
This is
Yeah.
very unique for the Somali nomadic culture. So
Mm-hmm.
they're moving around. Everything, their
Mm-hmm.
belongings, everything else is sort of tied up to the camel,
Mm-hmm.
right? So they're
Mm-hmm.
moving. And then she
Mm-hmm.
says, I miss that life because in the
Yeah.
city, you
Mm-hmm.
have to have plan before you leave
Mm-hmm.
home. You're going to the grocery store and picking up things. You can't
Mm-hmm.
visit your friend's house. Pretty much, it's just like you have to have a plan because they
Mm-hmm.
live in crowded places and houses are
Mm-hmm.
small. There are
Mm-hmm.
statues, there's a traffic, there are streets, there are things like that. So
Mm-hmm.
you don't have this freedom of living wherever you choose. do you feel the same way? You've lived in the nomadic culture. So what is the one thing that you actually miss?
It's
Wow.
kind of interesting. I think as you read, thank you, Abdi. That's a really beautiful question, and I'm happy to answer. Yeah, you are absolutely right. And in fact, as reading my story, you can see that woven in, right? You are right. One of the things, when I was gifted to my grandmother, some people say because I was such an intuitive, curious child, and the desert was what I actually needed, right? I don't know what it's like to be an older young woman, like being all her life living that world, right? But for a young girl, of course, what do children need, right? Play. So I will tell you, if I stand in front of my hat, like I will go, this is such a nomadic thing, Castor. We go like that. It's instinctively to protect ourselves from the sun. And you can see like mirage, shimmering in the horizon. And it's like far away. You can see where, like into a distance, there's a freedom that comes with it. I remember just walking hours and hours, and I was one of those children who loved climbing. Anything that stood 1 feet from the ground, I was on top of it, So here I was climbing trees, termite mount, right? Just being one rocks that just from certain way. And so your mom is absolutely right. There is that freedom that comes with where, children in school, I remember early on, when I come back to the city, I talked about, I have to learn. My father was a teacher, so he used to woke us up 4 a.m. I'm like, it's one thing to wake up, with your animal bleeding. It's another thing to wake up, to wake up with your father 4 a.m. waking you up for school. And I'm thinking, like, I am just only 4 years old. So I resented that, needless to say. So yes. And so whenever I go to my nomadic world, I loved it. Now remind you, Abdi, even as a young girl, before I was given as a gift of labor, I vacillated between those two worlds, right? Like, because I am a daughter of a mother who's still tangled deeply in that world, and a father who is really very adamant about education. So it was kind of some sort of a compromise that during the raining season, we would be taken to the nomad, and we will be, we will get fat and healthy and eat meat and jump around and do whatever we want. So I do remember looking up at the baby goats and doing things and just tumbling around and headbutting the baby, or sitting on top of a camel that's passively chewing his cud. So yes, your mom is absolutely right. I still long for that vast open land, that quietness that carries sounds of animals, kind of echoing in the distance. Even at night, as I slept in front of my grandmother's hut, I heard lions and hyenas, echo in the distance. Sometimes somebody will say, "Oh, they're fighting over a kill tonight," and that was my world. I had no fear of it, for I was with my grandmother, who really, yeah.
Thank you.
So you are right.
That was really great. So, as you know, the things have really gone bad for Somalia in the last 30 years or so. In 1991, we had a civil war.
Yeah.
Interestingly enough, it wasn't only the human that were either killed or displaced. It was also the animals that we are very proud of.
Yeah.
We lost pretty much 99% of our wildlife.
Yeah.
The wildebeest, the hyenas, the lions, all of that. They either migrated to Kenya, Ethiopia, and other places.
Or they may wander off to other borders that feel like safer, right?
Yes. To this day, we don't even know where they are, right? So my next question for you actually is, and I know you may not have a proper answer for this, like how do we keep this together? How can we have this nomadic culture that makes a Somali? Because if I think about a Somali, it's just a nomadic culture. That's who we are.
So true.
we dress our own ways. We played, we dance on the danto, music. We eat together,
Yeah.
And we're clans, but we are the only homogenous society that lives in Horn of Africa, speak the same language. All look like there's no white or black or brown. It's just pretty much the same people. Descendants of probably or fox, a few times multiplied. But so what is as you were walking through this book, what was your conclusion that you thought this is how we can keep this culture alive for the next indefinite years?
That's a very good question, Abdi. And it's very interesting to me because, as you know, Somali's drought has increased with great number, right, as the climates change. So this is a question for climate too, right? Like the climates are changing, and that is something we have to know, that we as human beings, this earth is all tied together, right? The mistreatment of one, it means drought for one area, and another one it means too much rain, and another means ice caps breaking earlier. You see what I mean? Some places getting too hot, some places, so the desert is probably boiling, and I don't even know if it's going to be inhabitable. But I think, I thought about, it's a really hard question, because I'm thinking, how could we, for one, maybe being aware of it, rehabilitating the land, maybe, helping the nomads, digging up more wells for them will be a good thing to do. Another thing you echo is the nomadic culture. You are right. This is our culture, right? We are a nomad. Whether, even if our children are not nomad, they stem from a nomad. That is a part of who in their DNA. This is the reason the Somalis are dealing with Al-Shabaab, with all of this extreme religious fear getting blown up. And then what do? We get up, because we come from the desert, and to survive the desert means this is the survival of the fittest. It's tested to its limit. Like, I been bitten by scorpion, right? Be bitten by snake, which my kids were like, Mama, was it a black mamba? And then they were like, oh, my mother, really? She was bitten by a black mamba. I said, no. But you know what I mean? Like, chased by warhawks. And I actually remember seeing this deer, like you call the dig, and all of this digiran, those little birds that kind of move in herds, flocks. And now people are saying they don't see much of giraffes, elephant, all of those things that maybe I saw as a child. And there is even lions are even disappearing. So going back, and maybe even in the city, we need to build a nomadic hut in them, kind of a museum. So we remind them love for this land, right? Museum is a good thing. Places where people can go, like in Mogadishu, I heard outside of it, there are areas people can get milks, and it's been a while since it is, or just see what it's like to be a nomadic land. People, the Somalis say, if there is any problem, there's nothing that camel milk can cure it, right? And camel is, what is it? It's the animal of the desert, right? It's the most resilient animal we have is the camel. We know when a camel kneels down, if you put a camel its knee, we know, like the worst droughts kill camel thing. That's an animal that can go on without a water for months. I know that because I've seen my own grandmother give it them after the camels drink water. She would give them salt. Like, as a nurse, I'm like, she was smart. That is a way to retain water. She did not want that camel to pee out all of that. So introduce them, build a hut in them, create a museum, create zoos, show people this animal, bring back to them. I heard that when the war happened, I left early. You unfortunately have to deal with the rats of Al-Shabaab and all of the clan wars that took place after. But I heard that the zoo was open and animals were left it. I think we can rehabilitate it back. Somalis are very resilient people, and knowing this rich history, we certainly can help. And this is why this book is written, Abdi, for the younger generation.
Absolutely. I wholeheartedly agree with you on that. And resilient, we're building Somalia. So I would like to ask the audience to ask questions on the Q&A, and then we can take those. And for now, I would like.
I'm going to turn on a light, so I'll be back. Okay.
Okay.
I'll be back. They can ask away. Sorry. Sometimes I have to babysit the lighting for here too.
There are two questions, I believe, from the same person, and I would like to read for you from the first one, Shugri. I still have my own questions here as well. So question number one, was there a particular catalyst that prompted you to write, to decide to write this book? Or did the notion arise naturally over time?
No, that's a beautiful question. Please thank them for whoever that wrote. Yes, that's a very intuitive. Yes, one of it we talked about the need to leave when an elder dies. So I'm not a library's burn, right? That need to leave something for my children and for the world, right? But really what urged me a lot and really made it more acutely for me to write was learning that my mother, my desert flower mother, the daughter of a poet and a warrior who passed away when I was 6, there was no pictures of her. And you know, Abdi, another things I learned is, I don't know, you probably know this, but the Somali I grew up, we come from a long line of storytellers, you know, like every night after a long day of animal herding, I will come upon, you know, the fire will be lit and we'll sit and we will soak in these old stories, poetry, storytelling, everything, and come to learn that this mother of mine, no one took her picture and her stories die with her. I was very indignant for her and I was very hurt. And that became more urgent as my daughter, who's now my oldest daughter, turned 6 and motherhood, you know, become part of me. I was like, who is the people I come from, you know? And I went in search of it. And, you know, I called my relative. I'm like, does anybody have a picture? I'm asking all this. And Abdi, I kid you not, I said, can you tell me a story? They go, pray for her. I said, okay. Oh, I said, she was a good wife. I said, okay. She obeyed her husband. Oh, and I'm like, okay, people, where is that culture that tell story? Where is that culture that share? And I'm like, am I me? Do I change? Or do all our culture denature? You know, we were the nation of Sufism and we practiced religion with kindness and it was okay to tell your story. But I felt like we were killing, we were maybe even denying. I was very confused what I was confronting. And I was like, no, this is not going to go on. So I excavate my mother's world for you. And there's no picture of her, but I think she come to life in words.
Another audience member of the audience is asking a question. What was the hardest thing about transitioning out of the nomadic life?
Oh, you mean as a child, they mean?
It could be, I think, pretty much getting out of the nomadic life.
Yeah, I think
getting out of the nomadic life.
Again, you know, as a child, like for a curious child who loved nature and freedom, as your mother echo, I love that part. Like I said, I did not know I was being sacrificed. I didn't know my sibling would grow up getting the education with their family. My grandmother was my world, and she was a poet. She was a brave woman who, even if she didn't like her husbands, she created a very intricate, complex, very simple poem and insulted them right while they're sitting there. And I thought, you know, so that was my world. But yeah, so I do really, Abdi, I do miss the freedom of climbing, turn my mountain, the freedom of just that blank state where your mind is just wonder. There's nothing in it. You don't have to worry about texting somebody or all that. It's just blank. And I think there's a healing to that. You know, there's healing to nature to the point that today, when I want to clear my mind or I want to be creative, I am like you. I head to nature. I hike. I talk to the birds. So that's a very good question. That is definitely what I miss, being one with nature and
I have a
freedom that
I
it,
have a, I
it
have a
comes.
question that I'm really, really very curious about. So,
Yeah,
as we know,
yeah.
Somalia is one of the places where the biggest clash between culture and religion actually happen, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
Whenever we talk about, or people talk about
Yeah,
women not able to go to school, not, well, basically they are able to, but the saying that it's inappropriate for women to be in a place of man, the military and the police and the offices and things like that. In
yeah.
Somalia, it turns
Hmm.
out the nomadic culture promotes women.
Yeah.
Nomadic culture does not differentiate or does not discriminate based on culture, right? Because my mother has always been as equal as her brothers.
Hmm. Hmm.
If they take the cows, she could take the goats. If they take the goats, she could take the cows. But
Hmm.
then I'm very curious because your father has a significant appearance in your memoir, and he
Hmm.
has not only raised you, but he sent you guys to school, your
Hmm.
brothers
Hmm.
and you
Hmm.
and yourself, as a
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
um. So now, sort of like the question is, how was that for you? Was there, um, as you were going back and forth between the nomadic life and the
Yeah,
city
yeah.
and
I think, Abdi, what I want to say is actually reading your book, Abdi, because you and I come from different clans. Not that I talk about clan in the book, not that I believe it, but I do know that I actually learned things from your being like your clan and how they were treated. I knew about the Rahan Wayne clan, as you say, but I actually learned something. What I know is, for me, is that even the Somali nomads, that they practice uh, um, female circumcision, but I believed you Rahan Wayne people. I don't think that was the case for Rahan Wayne nomadic, because to me, all of the women in my family, all of the nomads were very serious. But that is the beauty of you and I being, both of us being Somali, yet you being a Rahanwe, a tribe that was actually discriminated. Your inside actually opened me up. I had to laugh when you, or like I have to say, I've been awakened when you were talking about your mother hearing us, me, my Somali, right? Because your Somali is very musical and beautiful, right? And hearing your mother got shocked the way my Somali clan people speak, right? She was like, what are they talking about? I have to write it down today. I was like, wow, was very interesting to me, because I often thought when I first heard my language, I was like, wow, that is like, what are they saying? I couldn't decipher. All I know, it was very musical, right? I really wanted to learn that. So, let me go back. So my thoughts, in order to explain, I venture of that. But I think you were asking me, what was the question you were asking me? I was going to tell you,
well,
after
yes. I was going to ask you about uh,
there was a
the.
reason why I went to that tangent. Yeah, go ahead.
We also have two really interesting questions from the audience, and
Yeah,
I'd like to take this opportunity to ask everybody else to post their questions here, and I'm liking them. I was asking
yeah,
you about your father and
yeah, yeah.
how you guys um, basically daughters and sons. Look, so do you
Yeah, in my father's world, which
challenge
is not,
education?
yeah, so true, Abdi. In my father's world, which is not true for every Somalis, right? As you know, Abdi, boys were favored, right? If there was a scholarship to give, it was automatically given, invested on the boys, meaning they will be returning more things like we were given. But my father actually was an unusual guy, educated man who held a different view at that time. He really believed by educating his daughters, you were educated in the village. So for me, I really think that's not true. I know in the Somali culture, I believe that's my father really was unusual in his thinking. But the 70s were also a time of great reckoning, as you know. Somali literacy went from 5% to 50% as Siad Barre. Despite his dictatorship, he really helped when it comes to literacy, and had educated both nomads and city alike. Literally, I have relatives who were left, that when they enter high school, they send them to the nomads so they could follow the nomads around and educate them. That's an amazing accomplishment to him, despite all the other things he have done. Yeah.
Okay, question from the audience. I know this is your first book. Do you have any plans for others, meaning other books, I believe? And what has the experience been for you? What has the experience been like for you so far?
Oh, writing this book. I absolutely have a plan. First of all, I think this book, The Last Nomad, Abdi, is gonna give. There's another book that's gonna come out. I think, is it a young adult? What is it called? There's like this one from 8th grade to.
Well, a young adult is. I got my young adult out last.
Yeah. So what is it? Is it called? Is it for the young adult? You know, a lot of memoirs have this, where the main memoir, basically another book comes out.
I don't. Yeah. I probably assume that that's the hardcover that you have in hand, and then the paperback might be out on the way. So
yeah, and then they will write a young adult, which is kind of appropriate for a younger audience, for the 8th grade, I believe, to high school or whatever, college. That kind of language-wise suitable for that group. I am writing. I'm actually. So there's all kind of things that I'm working on. It's like one is a portal open, my mind open, and I feel like there's so many untold stories of my people that I now feel like I have to be the vessel that's gonna carry. So such as I'm working from picture book, which I'm really excited. It's gonna be about a young nomadic girl, and I'm also have a book that's like maybe 80% done, called Arawela, and it's about a middle grade book for that group, that kind of a little story based on this young girl. Arawela embodies the character of a queen, a warrior queen that lived somewhere in the 12th century in Somalia, that really was sick of men running the world, and she was like, she reigned with iron fist, and a time was needed. And then I've been interviewing Somali women, and I've been learning a lot. And I'm not even sure what I'm going to call. There's kind of couple of 3-4 essays I wrote about it during the pandemic time. And I just been interviewing what become of Somali women after a female circumcision. So a lot of us think, they went through female circumcision. They write us up as if we don't have feelings. You know, I get this look like, oh, you guys are the done women, kind of. And I really want to say, lives as a spectrum of women who, some of them are married to foreigners. I have a couple of Somali women who are married to white American guys, a couple of them young African American guys. So like, this is women who are marrying out of culture, right? Like they're marrying, like I am married to a man who's from Ethiopia, right? Somalis will be like thinking, really? You know, because Somalis and Ethiopian have like, they have always these issues from the get-go, you know? So, yeah, but.
Yeah, sometimes they say Somalia and Ethiopia is like the Palestine and Israel.
Yeah.
That's how bad it becomes sometimes. Here's another question for you.
Yeah.
And you are leaving my dreamland, California. That is
I love California.
From my book, I learned English by watching obsessively Hollywood movies, and I've always
I love the stories. You're amazing, Abdi.
Right. The question here for you is, you live in California now, and this person wants to know, Vanessa, thank you, wants to know, do you actually live in California? If so, do you go to the desert there? Just pretty much as a reminder, I guess, of where you come from. And how similar or different does it seem when you compare to the desert of California to the desert of Somalia?
First of all, let me say I'm an infusion nurse. So when I'm an infusion nurse that goes to people's home to deliver service. So basically I bring home to hospital. So I bring hospital to home. That's my Okay, anyway, so what I do is basically I'm starting IVs or accessing somebody's port or dealing with PICC lines, like very invasive procedures. All my patients, I'm giving them medications that agitate their immunity. That's almost like everybody wants to have an anaphylactic reaction on me. So what does that mean is I drive around and I see roads and hills that kind of have that golden grass and what look like in my mind acacia tree. I see deer, I see all kind of things that really mimic or remind me of world of my childhood. Now you don't have to have like a complete desert or something that exactly look like, but you can be triggered by a lot. And believe me, for someone who's always looking at the horizon, because that's what I've done since I was a child, I'm always seeing this beautiful landscape that are triggering. And I often really find myself sitting and under acacia tree and watching my goats or like, so memories are very interesting, whether it's through picture or through smell. There are a lot of things. So I do, and I hike a lot of times. There is an article on the Press Democrat for those of you who want to actually Google that it's called was talking about the book. So the lady and I actually hike one of my favorite area, Crane in it's in, I believe it's Rona Park or Katari, and it's a landscape that reminds me of that time. And I just watch the folders just glide in the air. I see animals and I hear the lizards as they just whisper or like whisper around. And so it's, if you wanted to see a world, and I do, I get satisfactions from that. So thank you for asking.
Yeah. I have I have other questions here that I need to read for you, but I would like to add that I traveled through California and I drove through Nevada and Arizona. And what I say was, if you take the highways and the roads and the gas stations and the signs out from America, it has a feeling of being in a Somali desert, right?
I agree with you.
The sky is blue, pretty much the same. It's warm, it's sunny, it's really nice. And I'm like, yeah, if my mother was here and there were no gas stations, she would pretty much feel like she was in Somalia.
I agree, because it's really, yeah, I agree with you, really.
Yeah, and it's thousands of miles away. So someone says the middle grade book that you were talking about sounds amazing. Any idea? Do you have any idea when that book, the young adult, will be published?
From that is the one that's coming from the Last Nomad. That is really the reason that I actually put my other project on hold to just get busy with that. And I am really excited because, as you know, I don't know about you, but my book was like 3 books by the time I was done. And I don't know if that was the case for you. I was like, holy, whoa, this is a lot. And so the editing process even took longer than writing. And I was lucky enough that I had a friend who really was dedicated, and she, her and I really, I was writing during the week and I was working as a nurse, and then during the weekend her and I would look at this and we become like editing and saying things out loud. It's quite a process. So what it means is I have to go back and put back something that was like, there was a story about me chasing an ostrich, trying to ride an ostrich, that can go back. There was a story about my father, and my father was one of a twin, and he was born in the desert, and my aunt was the first one to come out, and it took 3 days later for my father to be born in the desert, and they didn't know they were carrying. So that story of for me as a nurse, I find it very interesting, the whole process that took place to bring my father to the world. It was like, what? It looked like somebody was tying somebody like they were a goat or a camel that refused to birth. So there's a lot of stories that I'm excited to bring it back, and a lot of stories that I have to take it out, because female circumcision, we gotta find it something that's safe, and maybe perhaps not even talk about it, because that we don't want to traumatize young children.
Yeah, but I also think I talked a little bit about that in my memoir, and I had this conflict of myself as being a man in Somalia.
Yeah.
And we know for sure that the man in Somalia are the ones pretty much encouraging FGM because
Yeah.
he does not want to marry a girl who was not circumcised, right? That's the problem. And so
Yeah.
if that's your demand, the mothers don't want to have their daughters sitting around the home, so they have to do that practice. So I had to talk about it a little bit to just show that I'm not in agreement with that, and so
But just the way it is. Yeah.
I was hoping that women like you, authors, just have to speak up about that, and I'm really very, very encouraged by that. Here's another question: how did you end up in the United States and in California specifically?
Oh boy. My life trajectory, like it felt like every time there's some, I don't know, like if every time something is about to happen, something else and changes. Even ending up in Canada was just crazy too. It literally, believe it or not, at 17, I was misdiagnosed with breast cancer. And so that changes that. My sister, who was going to take my younger sister, my other sister's like, we don't know what's going on with this girl. You need to take her. So that just happened in time for me to have, come to Canada early. And as a result, I met my husband, which is the reason that I end up in California as well. My husband is my handsome nerd. He's a software engineer. So we were a young couple who get married early, and when around 2000, or when there was a great need for software engineers, we were brought here. And
excellent.
And that's how we end up in Canada. And I fall in love in California because really we have all of these amazing people. Like, Californians are funny, like they really take you in, and they're amazing people. And sometimes some of my funniest thing happened to me, Abdi. Like, I have this, I don't know, maybe we should make the audience laugh. And so there was a story of one of my, bunch of us mothers, we were like tired, and so we went out, no kids. And this mom was like, oh, Shukri, she's talking about cooking her own placenta and eating. And she's looking at me like, you African mama, you probably get me. And I'm like, oh, we don't eat our own placenta. They may work for you, but it was all these little things that always happened to me in California that had me laughing. They're the one who taught me to eat kale and all of these things that I never thought I would eat in my life. And I'm grateful for it. Some made me laugh, some made me smile. California is the place for me. I absolutely love and adore. But I always love visiting other places. I'm a nomad at heart, and I'm very itchy. Pandemics have been like really killing my spirit of traveling. So I am looking forward to, walking and traveling and doing all that great things.
Let's talk about Ayeyo. I'm really excited for this because reading your book, your Ayeyo, well, Ayeyo is a Somali word for grandmother.
Yeah.
And she reminded me a lot about my mother, and basically a typical Somali mother, right? Or grandmother, just that love. And you've been more attached to your grandmother than to your mother herself, right? So I would like you really to talk a little bit about that, like particularly, how you have a deep sense of courage, pretty much, and independence from her fearless, skills and things that you've learned from her. So what are some lessons that you have particularly learned from your grandmother, from the Ayeyo? And how did that lesson that you learned, or those lessons that you have learned from her, got you through the challenge that you have met throughout as a child, as well as an adult?
Yeah, thank you, Abdi. The amazing question. My grandmother, Halima Hirsibile, right, who has a poet named Hati Hoga Ordalay, was a poet and an amazing woman. And writing this book, actually, I learned more about her, because when I was writing this book, like, I'm calling my sisters and I'm like, hey, what was that? I'm getting detail from all this because I was young too. So my grandmother was really amazing. What I learned was she was an activist on her own. She was a camel tamer, which was actually a job for men. She was a camel herder, which was a job for a man. I mean, she did everything. And if she didn't like a man, like I said, she picked up a very intricate poem and insulted the hell out of you. And she actually, as I learned, did not stop insulting other clans until she lost her hair, camel-haired hair. My beautiful uncle Duran and my aunt. Some said perhaps she was cursed, and but you know what I learned, Abdi? I actually learned something recently as I was researching something, and a lot of people know my grandmother's poem. They don't always know it's my grandmother's poem, but they know. There's a poem that I'm now researching to complete called, it goes like this. Hooyo qorqoda wuu qayliyaa intuu qayliyaa buu qalax tamaa naarida qaloo qari buu yiri naaqiiqiyo bixin buu yiri. It's kind of, you get it, but I heard that poem was and poem as something, we are a nation of poems, so we literally, we don't write it down. You say it, and generations will commit to memory, and years later perhaps it will remedy the pain of those of us who needed whatever thing we're going. So I come from a woman who dealt with lions, dealt with highness, everything. There is nothing my grandmother could not tame. So I grew up under that fierce woman. My grandmother lived in the desert until she was maybe close to late in her 90s. This is that, to survive this desert is like, it's tough. She survived droughts, crazy animals. I heard she even in the end broke her arms. I actually learned that she didn't want to get fixed. She was like, they wanted her to take medications and they fixed her wrong. And she's like, if the death is upon me, then let it be. And so she probably died in great pain. And that still touches me. So I am so grateful, that I grew up under the shadow of that strong woman, Abdi. And yes, she was a woman with great adaptability, resilience. And in a time we are in the midst of pandemics and all of the, working as a nurse, just our life, life is uphill. We are all suffering, to be honest. And it is hard. And I got sick this year, almost died. So I know that we are all going great deal of a hard time. So this is the woman who taught me how to be resilient. She engraved me in deep grit and adaptability. That really, to this day, helps me. Yeah.
So when I came to the United States 7 years ago now, actually.
How long ago, Abdi?
7 years ago.
Okay.
I came in August 2014.
It's still fresh off the boat, right?
Well, 7 years is enough for me to get to know a few things, right?
Yeah.
But I think one of the amazing things, or should I say shocking things that I came across was how comparing America to the Somali way of life.
Mm-hmm.
It's a world that is going so fast, right? We're pretty much not going that fast in Somalia. We have this deep network and connection with our grandmother, with our mothers, like when we're in Somalia.
Yeah.
Here it is, you might find a house located by the lake somewhere in Michigan, Maine, California, and the elderly communities, like a grandmother and her husband are all living together, but the kids are living thousands of miles away, hundreds of miles sometimes, and they get together on Thanksgiving and Christmas and just spend a couple of days together. So how did you come to the sense of like Americans are weird? The same way that I was feeling like, because our mothers are so attached to us. So if my mother was here, she would never want to live anywhere else. She would just say, hey, you can't find me a place, just put me in the basement. I told you right there. I want to share a kitchen. I want to share everything in your house. That's So what was your understanding of this coming to this world?
I think, to be honest, what helped me, there's a lot of shocking, such as I'll tell you, what shocked me was being a desert daughter. And I remember the airplane landing in Canada, and I see mountains and mountains of ice, and I thought, oh dear, you're expecting me to live here. I am done. And I remember asking my sister, what is that? And she said, like, baraf, ice. There's not even a word for snow, right, in our language, because the snow doesn't exist. So it was a shock, shock to your physical body, to your mental body. And it felt like someone dropped me into a new planet and said, go ahead and survive. I didn't speak the language. I was a bewildered young lady who just come from war-torn country, who is heartbroken because she dared to fall in love. I was carrying all of this, and I felt really landing lonely, confused. And this is why reason I tell people, when you see a newcomer, a new refugee, please take them by the hand. We may be strange, we may look weird, we may do strange things. Just welcome us. One of the things that I found very strange coming was obviously, like, other than the shock of landing, was for some reason my sister, who I was staying at the time, she was watching a show called Jerry Springer. That's the show that was that one, and another show. What was it called? Oh, I knew it's in the tip of my tongue. Do you know it? It's a Unsolved Mystery. You see, Unsolved Mystery and Jerry Spring. What are you going to believe about America, right? I'm going to be killed, dumped somewhere. That's what my sister kept telling me. I'm like, I think she was afraid that this curious person will just find a ways to. So I remember thinking, like, not knowing, like I washed clothes by hand in Somalia, machines. I remember thinking the escalators, really, it will just fly me off my feet. I remember after a long day of just leaving, taking an elevator, taking a stairs, taking a bus, I was exhausted. Like a computer that was overloaded, I wanted to crash because I was done. Like, this was normal. Take a bath, do this. But I was exhausted because, like I said, this is what people would probably feel if we take people here and land them, drop them in the middle of Somalia with our crazy Al-Shabaab trying to do crazy things. You'll be so scared and crazy. So I felt really the culture things was, I realized anytime, everything, maybe because I come here when I was 18 or maybe 19, it always takes me time calculating because I really don't know my real age. So I always have to look back and say, okay, 1974, or was I born 75? Really, and just sit down and calculate it. But if that was 18, I come into a right age to be able to adapt, But at the same time, I won't lie to you, like there are things that I get sad about it or shock me that I still I go, that it's hard for me to eat food and not offer people. To this day, I go, even during the pandemic, I go, I didn't touch, you can have it. The idea of just grabbing a food and just eating without offering is still something I cannot do. I do have people can do that, but for me, it's someone who come from a culture of hospitality, sharing. And my husband is culture Ethiopian. They are just like us. They literally feed you. They call it qursha. And my Ethiopian in-laws literally take a bite and feed me. They are even more, romantic, or, just like that love to feed you is there. So I landed a culture. My mother-in-law was living with me here, but I also understand the culture that birthed that,
Shugri, I really apologize. I don't mean to interrupt you. It's 0803, and you and I
please
both
go ahead. Yeah, Abdi, go ahead. Yeah.
You and I have to answer a question from the audience.
Yeah, please, Yon.
Any book recommendations from the two of us, other than your book and my book?
Oh, I
have recommended Ben Rowlands' City of Thorns and the Nuruddin Farah's fiction series, which is really good. So do you have any book recommendations that this audience who's asking the question that he could check?
Yeah, I am. I'm going to tell you really the books that I'm enjoying now, right? What I enjoy and I love. I don't know if everybody have heard of this one. It's called Where the Crowd Sings. And it's a book by Dahlia Owen. She, I think, was not an anthropologist, or maybe zoologist, somebody who studied animal in the wild. I first of all, I listened to her other book in audio called, I believe, The Elephant Needle and The Cry of the Kalahari. Maybe because I love animal, I love nature. And so that's how I actually was introduced. And then I learned she wrote this book. Wow, Dahlia Owen. Another book I recommend is by an African-American author, and I'm apologizing because I think her first name is Barrett. And if somebody can put it for people, she did the book called The Vanishing Half. Have you heard of that, Abdi? That is, yeah. And then another book I would recommend is Homegoing by Agassi something. And I apologize. Actually, you know what? There was a question that I answered. So I may have these books all written somewhere. I'm sorry, it's not coming as fast, and time is of the essence. But Homegoing, I think it's, you know, it's a story about an slave that stayed behind, and the slave that was it took place in Africa, in Ghana, and just an African tribe that one was enslaved and other one, and it follows back the path of all the way here, and you know, through generations. And I'm doing this surface because I wasn't prepared for the question, but those are beautiful books that I'm enjoying right now.
Thank you. Some of those books that you have recommended are actually just the links have been posted by Harvard Bookstore. Thank you so much for doing that.
Yeah, thank you. Please, yeah.
I hope we could get into all other. I mean, you and I could be talking for the rest of the night.
It looks like it.
I feel like 8:06 we could ask Harvard Bookstore to step in.
Hello.
Hi, Serena.
I have become very dark. Apologies. I guess I need.
Oh, this is Sam Happiness. Yeah, I know.
Thank you both for this really illuminating conversation. That was really wonderful. And thanks to the audience for great questions and for listening in. I hope that everyone has a great evening. And on behalf of Harvard Bookstore here in Cambridge, Massachusetts, have a good evening. Keep reading and stay well.
Yes, please. Thank you so much, Abdi and Serena.
Thank you. Thank you both.
Thank you, Serena. Thank you, Harvard Bookstore.